Welcome to the NCO Journal podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. This is a podcast series where we discuss published articles with authors and provide a forum for the open exchange of ideas, information, and solutions. I'm your host, Thiago Zapata, managing editor of the NCO Journal. Today we discuss the article Love and Leadership by Sergeant Major Anson Jordan, an instructor at the Sergeant's Major Academy. Unfortunately, Sergeant Major Jordan is unable to join us today. With us is Sergeant First Class Osvaldo Aquite, NCO ICE of the NCO Journal, and senior editors Staff Sergeant Brandon Cox and Tony Mena. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. I know that Sergeant Major Jordan is not able to join us today. I know I mentioned that in the intro here, but sorry we couldn't have you on board here, Sergeant Major. Hope you're listening. We're just going to go ahead and talk about your article, Love and Leadership. I thought it was an interesting article. I thought it was an interesting take on leadership. I think it's something that, I don't know, to some degree or another, we do love our soldiers, our subordinates, or we should at least. So why is it important for NCOs to recognize, respect, care for, and meet the needs of, in other words, love their subordinates?
I can go first. I think it's important because as you get higher up in leadership, your subordinates are actually the ones that are getting stuff done. You're just kind of filtering and directing. And so if you want to be the team that crushes its goals and its mission, like, you have to make sure they're taken care of. They get the job done, and you're just kind of the leader for that. And the sooner that you realize that your subordinates do the important work, like, the more important work you will actually accomplish.
Here's my thing. I really enjoyed the story, to be honest. I just thought that it was one of these things that, whether if you're a good NCO, I mean, does it matter if you love them or not? Whether you love them or not, you need to go through the same kind of steps to be a good leader. Especially if you follow the servant leadership model. So whether you love them or not, as long as you take care of them, you empathize with them, you meet you take care of their needs. Whether you love them or not, I mean, isn't it all going to lead to the same place?
Well, I think love is important, but I don't know if it matters that if you love the individual as much as you love doing the right thing and love being a leader and love getting the job done. I think it's all kind of interwoven in there. You don't have to love an individual soldier. You just have to love making sure they're taken care of, or love your job as a leader, I think.
Maybe it just depends on the individuals as well. Some have more of a capacity, whereas others are more, standoffish and not really, their emotions don't get tied up with what they do, who they are, who they lead. That's just my thought on that. It just seems like one of these things that whether you love them or not, a good leader is going to take care of their soldiers. If you love them, I think personally, I think it'll probably make you more effective as a leader, because they, as a subordinate, you know when somebody cares about you and for you, when it's sincere, you have a sense for it, and so I think that does make one, loving your soldiers makes you more effective.
I definitely think that having a leader who understands the challenges that you face, and then opens up to you about those things, like, hey, I see you might be struggling with this. Do you have everything that you need? Is there anything that I can help you with? I think that really goes a long way, as opposed to just, oh, well, it looks like you have everything. Carry on, get the mission done. And I think both get the mission done in the end, usually, but actually you get a lot more out of somebody who wants to be there and cares about the organization, cares about their team and their leadership, than you would out of somebody who's just there, well, I'm just here, just doing this thing, and there's no passion to it. I think that's the difference.
I think a lot of it comes down to also, and we've had articles about this in the past, whether people are doing things out of fear or people are doing things out of love. And yeah, if someone loves their leader, their unit, their mission, I mean, they're going to do above and beyond the minimum or even what's asked. Whereas if somebody just fears being punished, then they're just going to do the minimum to not get punished. And I think that was maybe 2 podcasts ago we had talked about that. It's a really great subject, and it's in a lot of the articles we receive, the difference between fear and love, and that you're always going to get more from a unit if they love what they do and they love their leader. So
I think people will be more invested
Mm-hmm.
if that. I mean, but the article though, it focuses more on the kind of the emotion of the emotions that if you if you put your if you make your emotions a part of the leadership process, I think that's what he's talking about. That it makes you a more effective leader, a more caring leader, more. I don't know. I guess if you think about it, because I love working, being part of the NCO Journal team here, and the more you love something, the more that it feels like the more you're invested in it. The more you want it to succeed, the more you want it to be, the more it becomes a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of thing, that the more that's a part of the equation, that love is a part of the equation, the more effective, the more enjoyable, the more you get out of it. Again, like I said, when you throw emotion or love into the equation. What's your take on this, Nikita?
Yeah, I really liked how the author started this article and kind of explaining what love is, right? So that we don't confuse the terminology here. I think it was important to establish that love is just a word to explain that of a leader extending themselves or being selfless service, um, and seeking the needs, legitimate needs, and the greatest good of their subordinates. So I think when we talk about what is love and what that encompasses, I think it's important to identify that that's what it means. It means to be a selfless um, leader who looks for the care of the mission, looks for the care of their soldiers overall before they kind of look inside. And I think when the leader does that, that's when we get to those things that Tony and everybody else here has mentioned already, where you get that intrinsic motivation from your followers, you get that desire to want to be a part of something bigger than yourself, and then you get that desire to want to excel at what you're doing. When you have leadership that supports you, that cares for you, that looks out for you, that wants the best for you, and I think that's why it's so important that the author started this out with what is love, right? To me, when I first read it, I was more like, oh, this is tying into the Army values, whereas selfless service, if everyone in the Army practices and has that selfless service mindset, whether you're in the leadership position or whether you're a soldier, you're gonna give everything for that organization. You're gonna give everything for your subordinates, and you're gonna give everything for those leaders to accomplish the mission and to and to get the job done and to do what the American citizens have asked us to do.
Yeah, this subject I thought was an interesting one because it got me really thinking. Incorporating that, I mean, love. One of the things the author talks about is that it's a word that most people associate with marriage or your family, loving your kids or your parents or whatever the case may be. So it's a very intense emotion that's associated with things that are very deep, and all of us obviously interpret it differently. But so I found this article interesting because it's an interesting tie to leadership, but it's an important one. And obviously, he's talking about more is more like brotherly love. Like love thy neighbor, love, care for the people that your subordinates and the people that you work with. So, but I was still, trying to link the word love with what he was talking about with leadership, and it just, it does tie together. Maybe just not as intensely. It's not as emotionally charged, obviously, when dealing with your work or your subordinates or leadership in general. But I think that it was an interesting take, and I was really happy to see that it. It's had a little bit of attraction on social media too. So not everybody's commenting. Hadn't been a lot of comments, but there's been some involvement. Some people are looking at it. But I'll be interesting to see if anybody even says anything about it. I'd like to see what their take is on that. So that would be interesting to see what the audience brings into the equation.
I think anybody at any level could take something away from this article. the author says it in the very beginning. It's an interconnection. He tries to find the interconnection between what 622 says about leadership and then what the servant leadership model says, which is extending yourself to identify and then meet legitimate needs of your subordinates. So I take that as, just a leader coming up and asking me or knowing, that I have a family, asking about them, how was your kid's soccer game last week? Has everything been going good at home? Are you working on your college and stuff like that? Just knowing little things about somebody can really push them to increase their motivation on their own in your organization.
You touch on something that really important, Sergeant Cox, and that's that, that act of a leader asking their soldier, "Hey, how was your weekend? How's your family doing?" I've seen that a lot of times, and I've had leaders ask me that question. "Hey, how are you doing? How this?" But you can tell when it's not sincere, and you can tell when it is sincere. When it's not sincere, it's just lip service. It's just like Roger. They might even ask you the same question later on in the day, forgetting that they've already asked you. So there's a difference in the act of trying to understand information or gather information from your soldiers to try to get to know them versus just doing the simple act, right? So I can ask a soldier how they're doing, but if I really don't care about that soldier, that information is not going to do anything. I'm not going to apply that information when I make decisions. I'm not going to apply that information when I'm, issuing tasks and things like that. So I think it's not just about the act, like Chago was mentioning, but it's also about the deeper meaning of that act, which is I'm here trying to find out what is best for my soldier. And I think that's that difference that the author is trying to identify here.
I just recently finished watching Band of Brothers. If ever there was a group of soldiers, of warriors, where there was love in the mix, you watch that show, there's no question about it. Those men, to this day, they're like in their, I don't know what, 90s or 80s or whatever, and they still, they still love each other. They still care about each other. They would die for each other. But watching that movie, it makes you realize that, loving your soldiers and loving those your subordinates, it can lead. It's something different when you're in the combat zone. I remember when I was in Iraq, I'd love my guys. I would do anything for them. Had anything happened to them, it would have devastated me. So it's like, I guess you can say in a way it's a two-edged sword. Having that love for your soldiers, your subordinates, definite reality here that, being in the Army, that you may at one point be called upon to go out there and may have to make the ultimate sacrifice, or maybe one of your soldiers does, or whatever the case may be. And loving your soldiers is going to lead to, it could possibly lead to a different path, where it would be so painful. But on the other hand, too, that kind of love in the combat zone is just that much more intense. You feel that much more tied in with your subordinates, that much closer to your subordinates and your team.
I got a personal, story about one of my favorite leaders who loved everybody. So if we want to take it that direction. So my favorite leader and favorite memories revolve around a guy named John shooting the lights out Murray, because he was a rock star. And there was nothing that Murray would ever ask you to do that he wouldn't stay late and do with you, to include, like, right before we went to Iraq, 2005, we had to get all these medical records ready, and that's like the most boring part of the job. And anyway, he showed up with pizza and beer, and he didn't have to, but he wanted to make sure that everything got done, and he wanted to help and be a part of it. And that relationship actually extended past what would be my enlistment, because he stayed in. He became a E9, or a Master Chief. And, I vacationed in Chicago with him several times and met his family, and it was just wonderful. And, a relationship beyond just the uniform. So one of my favorite memories was in Okinawa, right before our Iraq training. There wasn't a whole lot of, back then, the TCCC, or the Tactical Combat Casualty Care, as it was called back then, there wasn't a lot of standardization for it. And so Murray saw that, and he told me I could be as creative as I wanted. And so we spitballed a lot of ideas, and we ended up with an incredible training plan to include IVs in Humvees just blazing down the highway and sand dunes. And what else? We had some really cool sound effects that we played. We got to use moulage that looked very almost real.
Wait, what do you mean sound effects?
Oh, like blasting a stereo with like gunfire noises and explosions and Metallica, and I feel like it's a lot of the stuff that's probably used now that I've read about with a lot of the simulators, but back then it was like nobody was doing it, and it was really cool.
But we're still finding things out back then, man. I know that's when I deployed too. We were still trying to figure everything out.
Oh, medicine was changing so fast back then too. Anyway, several months later, and some casualties happened, and we were definitely prepared. And the thing with the casualties is, like, when your medical person goes down or gets injured, like, it's up to the Marines and how you, or the soldiers, Marines, whoever, not the medical person. So you're training really, and you're staying late, and you're making sure that everybody understands the material, no matter how long it takes you, is super important, pays off. Anyway, we get back, and again, back in 05, I guess 06 when we got back, we're nobodies. We're like E5s, and we're just having a good time and doing our job and doing what we grew up wanting to do. And word had spread, and all of a sudden the 3rd Marine Division Master Chief and Sergeant Majors, and they task us to revamp the 3rd Marine Division's TCCC, and we're like, okay, no problem, even though we're literally nobodies. But we did have the most combat experience at that time. And then a year later, Afghanistan, Murray gets shot through the shoulder blade, and his Marines had to take care of him. Again, the importance of loving your entire unit, entire team, and just a good dude. Obviously, he survived. I think he's got the bullet somewhere in like a jar or whatever. Yeah, and just that's my personal favorite story. I still talk to him probably once every 6 months, call him up, and he's out now. And yeah, he became a E9, helped tons of people, revamped so much stuff. And it was just so interesting because, back when I first knew him, he was an E5, and who knew what was going to happen for either of us. And then I got out and he went on, and we've both done some really cool stuff since then. And I feel like I love everyone I've been around. So it's a lesson I've carried with me outside of the military. It's just doing the right thing and being a good person. And I think that's my personal reflection and how this article affected me and why I enjoyed it so much. So,
you bring up an interesting point too. It's like we all have different people that we've known over the course of our careers, and obviously you're thinking of love and leadership. That phrase, that title of this article, it was synonymous with this person that and it brought him straight to mind. And I think that's the thing, is that we all, to some degree or another, know who does kind of love us, as leaders or care for us, and who doesn't. It's one of those things that you intrinsically know, kind of deep down. You don't have to put your finger on it. Nobody has to say anything. Nobody, actions speak louder than words. And ultimately, as a good NCO, you have to do the right thing. Just like Tony just said, you do the right thing. You care for your people, and that they'll know it.
It goes back to like what Chargo was saying. Sometimes those combat relationships that you have with other soldiers or peers outweigh the connections you can make with other people. And I think it's just that shared terrible experiences that you have with people that bring you closer together. And it almost is a crutch too, because when you try and meet new people, or you try to have them understand what's going on, that you just can't connect with them all the time. So sometimes you got to find new ways to connect. And I think that that's really what this is talking about. It's more of like it's a now. It's like kind of a peacetime type thing, where these are the things that we need to focus on and trying to build those relationships in our units now, because we're not always having those combat experiences together. But I do know a very non-combat experience that I had in keeping kind of what Tony was saying. You have a leader who cares about you, about your actual well-being, that they're willing to sacrifice their time and effort to help you. I've actually had this happen to me where, I think I was in E4 at the time, and my Sergeant First Class came over, and he was just like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, I'm still working, Sergeant, And he's like, "Well, it's close time. You got to get cleaned up and stuff." And he's like, "Okay." So he just like picked up a broom and just started cleaning. And, I kind of looked at him like, I can't believe you're helping me right now. Like, most people won't, So it's those little things. And sometimes that's all you got to do. That gives me more trust in that leader to take care of me, even for future things that have nothing in relation to what just happened.
You can say all the right things to your subordinates, but just like you said, it's those little things. Actions speak louder than words. What you do to show you care for them speaks 1,000. I mean, you look at that. That guy picked up a broom, and that's stuck in your head, and that tells you something about that individual. So maybe maybe as leaders, that's what we need to, focus on, about picking up that broom as well, and not just expelling hot air through our pie holes. And actually doing rather than saying.
I've had some great moments, where E8s, E9s pick up a broom just for no reason, or just like they don't forget, how to do the little stuff, and that's powerful and motivating, especially when I was, E nothing. Like, oh man, this really high up leader is literally sweeping this hallway. Just I don't know, maybe it's therapeutic, or maybe it's just the right thing to do, but it sends a message to everybody that nobody is above any of the work. So
I have a question for you all. Like, what do you think would happen if every leader in the Army practiced, the tenets here of being a selfless or servant leader? What kind of effects do you think the Army in general would see?
I think retention might be better. Or I don't know that it's bad right now, but it would definitely improve, I think. With people who are, if leadership cares about their soldiers, and to the degree that's expressed in this article, I think it would have a snowball effect to the whole force, and it would be better retention, better recruiting, I would say. Possibly. I mean, there's no way of really knowing, but that's one of the big effects I'd say.
On that same note, Chago, I think a lot of times I hear soldiers, a lot of my own friends, they say they get out because the Army's just not for me, because, people were too much. This guy was terrible, or whatever. This unit was awful. And I hear that all the time. And I've had so many varied experiences already that sometimes it's like, okay, do I want to stay in? Because what's my next unit going to be like? Like, yeah, it's good now, or it's bad now, but what can I do to change that? And do I want to continue this? And I think sometimes if you always had somebody who cared for you, this would be a no-brainer. Like, if I could stay with my, my favorite unit all the time,
NCO
I would do
Journal.
that. Which is, the NCO Journal.
stay here, bud. Yep.
Right? But I think that is a big thing, because I tell my buddy all the time, I was like, shoot, if we could stay in the same unit all the time, like, I would stay in forever.
There's some things just need to. It's like it's a well-oiled machine that has to go a certain way in order to function, and that's just a part of it. I think that ultimately what it comes down to is no matter where you go, it's about the people, and if people do the right thing for the right things for the right reason, and care for their soldiers, if even if it's just doing the right thing, they may not love them, but just doing the right thing for them, that's ultimately, I think, it's only going to lead to positive things. So if there's any sort of, I guess, point to this article, is that, care for your people, do the right thing, and beyond that, I think they'll care for you, and if you grow to love them, even better. They're gonna love you back in some way or another, or at least invest themselves in you as well as the way that you've invested yourself in them. So, people, it's all about people.
I think that, like I was saying, that shop that I had, though, it's good because they all split up, and spread some of that to the rest of the Army. And I think that's what's important, and that's what we have to focus on.
There was a movie a while ago. I can't remember. Carry It Forward, or what's it called?
Pay it forward.
Pay It Forward, right? And I think that's what you're saying, right? You
In a
pay it
way,
forward.
yeah.
You learn. That's the thing. You learn from bad leaders sometimes more than you do from good leaders. So if a bad or somebody you consider a bad leader does something, you learn from it. You move on. You don't ever do that kind of thing, and you pay it forward. The good things, and ultimately they'll come back to you in some way or another, maybe.
No, I think you guys hit it on the nail there, and that's kind of where the author concludes this article: is leave a legacy worth remembering. And I think if we were to practice this, being a servant leader, caring for those that you lead, it would also prevent a lot of the problems that we do see in not just the Army, but in big organizations where, like harassment, suicides. I think this would get after those things before those things become issues. So I think it's key, exactly what you guys just said, that you want to just not just love what you do, but love those soldiers that are helping you accomplish that mission.
Final note for anyone listening: if they can think about a leader that's done things right and want to do a personal reflection, they can put it in the comments. They can submit an article to us. We love these. I just feel like those personal reflections really teach people a lot from experience. My favorite way to learn. So if they take anything away from this, definitely submit to us.
On that note, NCO Journal team, thank you for joining me, and thank you to our audience. Remember to put your knowledge to the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. Don't forget to check out our webpage and follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal podcast.